Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker tonight is perhaps the greatest cheerleader for the city of Birmingham that's out there. He is a freelance journalist who also operates a website here called The Terminal. And if you haven't checked out The Terminal before, if you aren't aware of it, you really need to take a look at it. It's everything from politics to society to what's happening on the weekend. You need to check it out. It really is a must read. Please welcome to the stage our last speaker tonight, Andre Nada.
Sure what story to tell this evening, because there are a bunch of stories involving Birmingham that make a lot of sense in my head from all these years. Let's see, there's the time I learned how big the Alabama-Auburn football game is, because when you drive in with Georgia plates on Iron Bowl Saturday, you can do 15 miles over the speed limit and watch everybody get pulled over depending upon which county you're in. If you're down in Birmingham. I can tell you about driving over and watching torrential downplay play over at Arte Nida. Can't even know where that is, over in Lakeview. And that probably tells you how old I am and how long ago that was. But the story that makes the most sense is my first visit here, and it started with a phone call and a question. My friend Nick called to see how I was doing. Now, I just learned I could take classes for summer quarter, which is welcome news to someone attempting to reboot his academic career after a suggested year off. So I was doing pretty well. I've long claimed that Nick took full advantage of my glee when he decided to spring the following question on me. Hey man, Phil Collins is playing city stages this year, so I don't know if you wanted to go over and check it out or not. Well, now, we talked before about possibly visiting our friend Chris over in Birmingham, who loves Birmingham. We never heard anything bad about Birmingham for 4.5 years he was in Savannah. There was never a moment where he didn't sing his praise. Now, we'd also discussed finding an excuse to go to one of the big music festivals just because it thought it'd be fun. We also knew, going back to Chris for a moment, that Chris had been back for about 6 months, and as much as he loved Birmingham, he was homesick for Savannah. So we knew we had to go check on our buddy. Now, add to that the fact that I just had a conversation with my boss at the inn, who suggested I might want to take a vacation, because she knew I hadn't had one in 2 years, and that we were going to be extremely slow around Father's Day, as was the case in Savannah, still to this day. And finally, I had the newer car between the two of us, to a 2-year-old car, but everyone knew I looked to go driving. They also knew I didn't like anybody else driving the car. But we also knew that my car could make the trip and Nick's couldn't. Now, on top of all of that, so I was already kind of smiling and excited. And then he pulled out what he hoped would be the clincher, the line that would secure my agreeing to this crazy trip. It'll be just like you're back at home. Now, those words still stick in my mind 17 years later. Nick had been to Birmingham once before for city stages in 1997. He'd been the one with the car that worked, available to make the trip, but then recently graduated Chris as his trip to come start looking for an excuse to move back home. Nick's from a little over an hour north of New York City, but he spent enough time in the city to sound more like a native New Yorker than I do. He knew better than most folks I considered friends what I thought when I said the words, "I'm from New York." Now, tall skyscrapers looked off in the distance and served only as an occasional wonderland to explore, because Manhattan was just another country. As I walked through the neighborhood to grab a slice of pizza or a hot dog across the street from a church called the Cathedral of the Bronx. Growing up with a view of the city from atop its highest naturally occurring point meant I could watch fireworks from Central Park, in addition to the ones set off by the notorious gangster John Gotti in Brooklyn, to mark the start of the new year. Lights were on at Yankee Stadium. It meant it was time for me to turn on the radio, because I didn't know there was a printed Yankee schedule until 1990. The neon adorning Shea Stadium sometimes framed takeoffs and landings at LaGuardia. The World Trade Center and the RCA building were barely as big as anything I attempted to build with Lego blocks when viewed outside my parents' bedroom window. Though I knew from the occasional trip to visit my Uncle and Hill's kitchen that they were very, very much taller. My neighborhood also meant everything that mattered to the outer boroughs. The Bronx Zoo, the gardens were either a 15-minute bus ride or a 40-minute walk from the house. I had 3 movie theaters within walking distance and a satellite version of most department stores within walking distance. The homes were a mishmash of various types, craftsman style. We were living in an apartment complex that looked like Le Corbusier had went ahead and pooped out an English village in the middle of the Bronx. There was also a desire to dream and dream big, because University Heights, we were down the block from where NYU used to be. Folks like to say I'm from Brooklyn, words that can sting to a native, the only portion of the city located on the U.S. mainland. It lived small, but had all of the aspects that you needed, everything you needed to do it. It's one of the reasons I ended up switching majors upon returning to college, because I was interested in the social aspect of what made cities work. And I say all that because now somebody was telling me that the one thing I hadn't been able to find yet while living down south for 5 years, and that's something I've been looking for 2 years driving around. On one-day drop-ins in Charleston and Charlotte and Atlanta existed in Birmingham. You're serious?
Yes.
My time in went in the training state. I didn't know what to expect in Birmingham. The stories told by Chris when he was in Savannah suggested it would be different than what I was used to in the South. The cities I mentioned before enjoyed being part of the New South, though they're also quite frustrating to someone who's used to a simple grid and a fairly straightforward path between points A and B. The historian in me knew of this city's significance, but when I posed the question, "You're serious?" to Nick, it wasn't because of the city's past, it was because I had no idea about its present. Attending SCAD in the mid-90s meant you were more likely to leave school knowing at least one person from Georgia, New York, Maine, Alabama, and somewhere in California. We've been exposed to students from all 50 states and 80 countries. Our classes taught us that the past was there and lived, but that it didn't control the present, it only influenced it, and didn't always have power over the future. It also doesn't hurt that I grew up in a part of New York City that most know only from scenes from Fort Apache, where if I'm lucky, somebody knows an old school joint from Louis Down Productions. I'm used to folks passing judgment, but I didn't even have one available to me to make about this. At the time, most of us from New York knew that Birmingham had produced Alan Hunter, Julie Gentry from The Real World Toland, and most importantly to me at that time in my life, Angela Davis. But that didn't really tell me anything except there were some really cool people here. Add to that, my dad was an anomaly for New York in his day, a black male head nurse in the city, albeit for a private hospital in the mid-70s. I ended up growing up in the heart of the second largest parish in the Archdiocese of New York, one overwhelmingly Irish, when we moved in, and one that is overwhelmingly not today. Meaning that we got to watch and participate in making the demographics of the Bronx and University Heights change from what it had been in the good old days. Now, I convinced my parents to let me move down south 5 years earlier, taking some doing, and it didn't hurt that my cousin was working for the British Consulate General in Atlanta. Meaning I had that one relative that you have to have in the state. Even though she didn't have a car, she was still in the state, so then it was all good. Now, that didn't work when I said, "Hey, I'm going to Birmingham for a 3-day trip with my parents." All they knew about Birmingham was what they saw on TV. In my dad's case in Ottawa, Ontario, my mom's case before she moved up north. So their rules were, because it was 3 years before I had a cell phone, and it was a 6-hour drive, that we had to check in constantly. Well, we didn't do that because it wasn't a 6-hour drive, it was actually a 9-hour drive. And really, it became a 10-hour drive. And part of that may have resulted from not heading directly to Birmingham on the 18th of June, '98, because neither one of us thought we'd be in the southeast U.S. for much longer. So we figured it made sense to squeeze in as much in as humanly possible. So our journey that day ended up taking about 10 hours. And it included stops in Brunswick, Georgia, because of a flat tire that I just bought the day before. Thomasville, Georgia. Dothan, Alabama. Yes. Thank you. We had a good time. You know. Selma, Alabama, because we wanted to see the Evan Pettis Bridge, and found it really frustrating how hard it was to find a parking space, which seems really weird when you go back years later and look up their story, and it's all over the place. Montgomery, Alabama, because Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, I'm an architecture historian, because I study social history. I don't stop at that church, I'm in trouble when I get there. Before finally heading towards Birmingham, while laughing at the devil will get you sign for about 40 minutes. We'd have gotten to town a lot faster if we hadn't turned on the 459, though I doubt I would have appreciated the view as much as I do now. We came in, because of 459, we came in on 20. He came out on 20 going westbound, which meant we drove in, and you could see Crestwood Boulevard. So this is 1998, which means there were cars on Crestwood Boulevard at 9 o'clock at night. It means Eastwood Mall was lit up. It means Century Plaza was lit up and the parking lot was full. It meant the really cool Hotel Birmingham sign was lit. And it kind of reminded me a bit of home, because there was a hustle, and there was a bustle, and there was a really cool neon sign that was sitting on the side. So we continued along 20, merged with 59, drove when I was at the airport, which again reminded me of home because I lived right in the final landing pattern for the water, which means that for fun growing up, we used to watch airplanes and guess what type of airplane it was landing. And it's something I still do now because 17 years later we live in the landing pattern for Birmingham International Airport. If I really don't feel like writing, I will go outside and look up. The Southwest airline planes take some of the fun out of it. So we ended up figuring out we had to get off. So we got off at 31st. We drove along 12 for a few blocks and decided it makes sense to double back and drive the other side of the interstate. We then started driving down into town along 5th after first ending up over by Sloss Furnace only to get stopped by a train. Seeing the skyline immediately emerge ahead of us from the tunnel before veering off and then winding our way through downtown where possible because it's City Still weekend. But it's Thursday, so there's no crowd, it's just you can't drive in there. So some streets were already blocked off, and some were in the process of being blocked off. We found our way over to 16th Street Baptist and noticed the Civil Rights Institute and Kelly Ingram, but we kept going because we were hungry, and we hadn't stopped in a while. We kept zigzagging our way through downtown, Southside, and Lakeview, and partly because I'd driven the whole way, but Nick only knew how to get to Chris's house if we went one particular way, and we were trying to figure out how to get to it. We kept looking at Vulcan, knowing it was close to where we were trying to go. The whole colored spirit thing seemed kind of cool too. It was green then. We eventually stopped and called Chris. After driving by the fountain in front of St. Vincent's for 4 more times, we found our way up 29th Street and into the parking lot. As we figured out, Chris didn't have anything in the house to eat, which meant my first meal in Birmingham was a purple onion on the south side. At some point during the evening, they both asked what I thought. I told them I didn't know. The next day, we slept in while Chris went in for what became a half day of work. We met him at lunchtime at his office on Morris. Again, Kentucky. I already had a better understanding of my first thoughts. It was like home. Downtown was bustling. I knew, though later I'd learned not to go into an even quieter period. Everyone kept telling me how, well, it used to be better. But it's still good now. I'd already seen 3 hospitals. I grew up being able to see 4 and an armory. It's scary. If you've ever taken a moment to enjoy the beauty that is Birmingham in mid-June, heat and all, it is one of the most relaxing things possible. Driving around Highland Park reminded me of sections of Riverdale, sections driving down Pelham Parkway in the Bronx, heading toward the beach, only there's no beach. Unless you're driving out to the mountain, which we're going to. The only thing I'll say about my first night at City Stages was, it was 1998. Was anybody at City Stages in 98 in this crowd? Was anybody at the Phil Collins Big Band performance? You all were very smart. Anyone who was there still trying to forget, because there was no singing. None. He played a 2-hour set with no singing. Luckily, Junior Brown and the Dixie Chicks taken up enough space in my brain to help forget most of that disappointment. That and hearing Semisonic close their cigar with closing time. Yeah, see? We spent Saturday morning bumming around town. We had breakfast in 5 Points, drove up to visit Vulcan, looking out the city, and eventually found our way over to the Birmingham Botanical Gardens. We parked ourselves in a section that was made possible in part by Southern Living magazine, which is sort of an interesting side note because Chris ended up working for Southern Living about a year and a half later. At the time, he was like, oh, I'm Southern Living, Southern Living magazine. We were waiting on a thunderstorm, assuming it must be pouring downtown. It wasn't. But that lightning bolt that struck a few yards over from us definitely woke us up. It also reminded me of a moment in my life from Savannah in '92 where the lightning bolt struck. Lightning strike proved fortuitous. We ventured downtown where I saw what I still consider one of the best encore sets ever for a band, as the Squirrel Nut Zippers ended up jamming for 20 minutes while their generator was on fire. Meaning the whole set was acoustic. We stopped there at the festival on Sunday, though we spent most of that day exploring Kelly Ingram Park and the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Took some pictures that day. I never got the roll of film developed until I'd been living here for a year. Now, that's some years later. It was 2005. I got the photos developed. They were photos from the trip to the gardens and me sitting in front of the 16th Street Baptist Church on that Sunday. Because we took the picture assuming, well, we'll never get back here. We'll never come back. It's fun. It was also my first visit to Pete's Famous and my first time drinking a grape Rico. And one really quick side story that I have to stick in here. I interviewed for my job that got them. Actually, I was sticking in a little farther on. We got back to Savannah just after lunch on Monday. Made it possible for me to get to work at 3 o'clock, which was good. That meant the boss wasn't too mad. We decided we had to do it all over again, and we did. The trip became an annual pilgrimage, at least for 4 years. Even when City Stages moved to May, though it didn't feel right not being able to say, hi Dad, I'm calling from Birmingham. Anyway. When I had to evacuate Savannah for Hurricane Floyd, I ended up here with a cat, a girlfriend, her sister's friend, and ended up watching They Might Be Giants jam out at 5 Points Music Hall for a show that I would have never been able to see if we'd been back in Savannah because it got canceled because of the hurricane. I brought a different cat here the following year so I could head up to Huntsville for a wedding from another friend from college. It was the last trip I made here for 2 years. I found myself restless in Savannah and decided I could make another trip to Birmingham with a different girlfriend. And I got back to work on a Tuesday morning, looked around while I was here, and I gave 3 months notice. And my boss actually was on the phone with the guy who became my boss for about 45 minutes and throwing my recommendations. Should probably explain why he knew a little bit more about me than he should have. But I came to that interview, and I went in, and this is probably the moment where this whole story makes sense and explains what works for me about Birmingham. Went and did the interview. Went and had lunch. Got a phone call from Chris. He says, Alan Hunter wants to talk to you. Okay. Go. 2 hours with Alan Hunter. And I'm like, I'm hungry, and we're not eating dinner for a while. So I'm going to Pete's. And I walk in, and he's like, well, what are you doing here? Want to break it down? I'm like, well, yeah. What are you doing here? I'm like, well, I'm interviewing for this job. Oh, what are you going to do? It's like, well, I'm working for, and I knew enough to know how to explain it. I said, well, I'm working for the equivalent of O&B for neighborhoods. It's like, oh, sounds good. That was in July. My first day on the job was September 8th, 2004. I walked in the following day to Pete's. I ordered 2 specials and a grape ago. And y'all understand, and most folks who go to Pete's or used to go to Pete's know you never really have a conversation with us. You never really did. First question we got, so I guess you got that job, huh? It was the most relaxing moment possible. It felt like I was back in the Bronx ordering a pizza before the pizza going out. It satisfied the dream of living up north without having to go back up north. And it's probably one of the reasons why I am this big cheerleader that everyone says, because it's a city that lets you dream and lets you have those real nice personal moments. And we chance to go. Texas.